Morning Year 5, hope you had a good weekend. Time for chapter 10. Gideon and I huddled in the cab. Mother had to pull us out. Please be so good as to wait, she said to the cabman and approached the porter. If you please, sir, I'm bringing my 2 foster children back to the hospital, she said. He nodded and let us through the forbidding gates. Mother walked us along the long gravel path towards the doorway. We stared up at all the windows, but we couldn't see inside. There were no children peeping out at us, no children playing on the grass, no children anywhere. I strained my ears, but I could hear no chatter, no singing, no laughter. Mother rang the doorbell and a tall woman in a dark dress and white apron opened the door. She had a white cap tied on her head and a long, grim face. She did not smile. Foundlings 25621 and 25629, she said. Yes, ma'am, said Mother huskily. This is Gideon Smead and Hetty Feather. They are such dear children. Hetty is very bright indeed, and Gideon is very good and loving. Though he doesn't speak just at present, he needs a little extra cosseting. We treat all of our foundlings in exactly the same manner. We have no favourites here, said the nurse. Come along, children. She held out her hands. We shrank backwards, clutching Mother. Say goodbye, the nurse said firmly. I was struck, as dumb as Gideon. I couldn't believe it was actually happening. Not now, not so coldly and quickly. Mother gathered us together and kissed us, first me, then Gideon. Goodbye, my dear lambs. Try to be good and make me proud of you, she whispered. Hetty, look after your brother. She straightened up and took a step backwards. Then she turned and ran down the path, her hand over her eyes. Mother! I called. Before she could look back, the nurse shut the door, trapping us inside the hospital. She clasped our hands determinedly. Her own hands were icy cold and startlingly smooth. We were used to Mother's big, work-roughened hands. I am Nurse Beaufort. Come with me, she said, setting off at a quick march. We had to scurry fast to keep up with her. Gideon tripped once and she jerked his arm impatiently, hurting him. He started crying then, big tears splashing down his cheeks. Don't cry so, Gideon. I'm here. I will look after you, I said desperately. Shh, child. You're not allowed to talk until outdoor playtime, said the nurse, yanking my arm too. She pulled us up a long flight of stairs. There was another nurse standing there waiting. She was dressed in an identical dark frock and white starched apron, but she was smaller and very squat. Her dress strained at the seams and her white cap seemed too small for her dark pink face. She had little eyes, prominent nostrils and several chins. Looking for all the world like a pig in a bonnet, I gave a little snort, half laughing, half crying. Be quiet, child, she snapped. She seized me by the shoulders and propelled me to the right. My head jerked round. Tall, grim Nurse Beaufort was propelling Gideon the other way. Oh no, if you please, nurse, Gideon and me, we have to stay together, I said, struggling. I am not a nurse, I am Matron Peters. Now come along, child. You cannot go with your brother. The small girl's wing is this way, said Pig-Face Peters. But you don't understand. He's only little. He can't manage without me. Nonsense. It is not nonsense, I shouted, stopping in my tracks. I have to look after Gideon. I promised Mother. You must forget all about your foster mother now. You are a foundling child and you will obey our rules. Our boys and girls live separately, and so will you. Then let me say goodbye to Gideon. Let me explain to him. Oh, please. Stop this ridiculous fuss this instant. Hetty Feather. I won't stop. You are very cruel and wicked. And I hate you, I cried. I twisted my wrist out of her grasp and ran the other way after Gideon. Gideon! Oh, Gideon! I shouted. He was dragging his feet and drooping, his boots barely supporting him. He looked round, his eyes wide, his mouth a great O of terror. Then fat pig trotter fingers seized me by the shoulders. She hauled me along, kicking and screaming, marching me to the right, away from my poor brother. How dare you behave so atrociously? You will be sorry, my girl, very sorry. She pushed me into a strange cold room with small bathtubs in orderly rows. Right, Missy, take your clothes off instantly. You need a bath. I stared at her. But I've had a bath. I'm clean as clean, look. Country clean, she said scornfully. You need a good scrubbing to get rid of all those nasty bugs and beasties. Get those clothes off while I fill the tub. I took off my coat and then sat down to start unlacing my boots. The matron crumpled my good coat up into a little ball and dropped it into a basket. I gave her one boot and she threw it on top of my coat, careless of the muddy soles. She saw my shocked expression. You won't need these any more, she said, giving the basket a contemptuous shake. I blinked at her. Were the foundling children required to run around naked? You will wear our uniform now, she said. Can I wear my best clothes on Sundays, miss? You must call me matron. No, you wear your white tippets and aprons on the Sabbath, with bands around your cuffs, specially snowy white. And woe betide if you get them dirty. Now hurry up, child. Get the rest of your clothes off and step into the bath this instant. While she was topping up the bath, her back turned. I took Jem's precious sixpence out of my pinafore pocket. I stuck it inside my mouth for want of a better place to hide it. The coin tasted unpleasantly metallic and felt as big as a dinner plate against my cheek, but it couldn't be helped. I was right to be so cautious. Once I had my pinafore and dress and drawers off, standing shivering in my shift and stockings, the matron darted at me, snatched my rag baby, and threw her in the basket too. She's not clothes. She's my baby, I protested, though it was hard to talk distinctly with the sixpence wedged in my cheek. It's nasty and dirty, and you're not allowed dollies here. But I can't sleep without her. Then you will have to stay awake, said the matron. She pulled the shift over my head, plucked my stockings from my feet, lifted me up and plunged me into the bath. Then she took a cake of red carbolic soap and started scrubbing me viciously. I wriggled and squirmed at the indignity, especially when she started washing my long hair, digging her fat fingers into my scalp and kneading it as if my head was a ball of dough. I put my hands up, trying to protect my poor head. My fingers scratched her wrists, and she dug harder, furious. Keep still, you fiery little imp, she said, lathering me into a foam. She fetched another jug to rinse the suds away. This will quench that fire, she said, pouring icy cold water over me. I gasped in shock and would have screamed at her, but I had to keep my mouth stoppered because of the sixpence. Then she hauled me out onto the cold floor and wrapped a thin towel around me. Well, dry yourself, child. Hurry up, hurry up. When I was halfway dry, she sat me on a stool and picked up a pair of scissors. I started trembling. What did she intend to do now? Cut off my fingernails? Cut off my fingers? She attacked my head with a hairbrush, smoothing out all the tangles so that my hair fell in a silky curtain past my shoulders. And then she started snip, snip, snipping, cutting my hair off right up to my ears. Oh, please don't cut my hair, I begged, but she paid no heed. She snipped until my hair was shorter than a boy's, and I was covered in damp red tendrils. She brushed them off me with the towel and then fetched another basket, the clothes inside this one neatly folded. This will be your clothes basket, Hetty Feather. You are to keep your clothes in it at night, and woe betide if you rumple them. She pulled out boots and stockings and bade me put them on. The stockings were stiff and bunched at the toes with repeated darning, and the boots were much too big for my small feet. I told matron, but she didn't appear to care. Put your dress on now, the right way round, you silly child. I will tie your apron for you. I hesitated. Where were my new undergarments? I saw something white in my basket, but it was simply a strange old-fashioned cap. There were no shift, no drawers, nothing. I sidled over to my old clothes. Leave them alone. They're going to be disposed of straight away. But matron, I have no drawers, I said, agonised. The matron's pig face went even pinker. You do not wear such garments here, she said. Now put that dress on at once. I stuck my poor shorn head through the stiff brown serge. It felt hard and scratchy against my scrubbed skin. She did up my buttons at the back for me, tied on the apron, and then stuck the cap upon me. There! Matron marched me over to a speckled mirror above the stone slab sinks. Respectable at last! I stared at the forlorn figure in the mirror. Was that weird little creature in the cap really me? I shook my head violently, but the girl in the mirror shook her head back at me. Now you will join the other infant girls. Come with me. I hung back, fidgeting. Please, Miss Matron, I need the privy, I blurted out. She consulted the watch pinned to her chest. The infant relief break is not for another hour. You will have to wait. But I need to go now, please. I'm nearly wetting myself. She sighed impatiently. The privies are outside in the yard. I'm not trailing you all the way there. You will have to use a chamber pot. Go in that little room and be quick about it. You must learn to control your bladder as well as your temper, Hetty Feather. I ran into the room, selected an ugly pot and sat on it, trembling. What sort of madhouse was this? I put my fingers up under my cap and felt the shorn ends of my hair. I gave a little sob. Even if I managed to run away back to Jem, maybe he wouldn't love me any more because I looked such a fright. Hurry up, child, Pigface grunted outside. Safe behind the door, I took the sixpence out of my mouth, stuck out my tongue and waggled it at her. Then I hid the sixpence in my new tight cuff and jumped up from the pot. Now wash your hands, she said as I came out of the little room. Dear goodness, do you know nothing of hygiene? I didn't think it all hygienic to run around without underwear. I wondered if the matron wore drawers herself. I imagined her big, piggy pink, bare bottom. What are you smirking at? She said suspiciously. I lowered my eyes and shook my head. Nothing, matron. Then come along with me. You will join your class in the afternoon tasks. She took hold of me by the wrist. I looked back at the little basket of my Sunday clothes, so lovingly washed and pressed by Mother. They were all in a muddy jumble now. My poor rag baby sprawling on the top, arms and legs akimbo. Come on, you're no need of those nasty old clothes any more. I've told you that already, said Matron Pigface. Mayn't I just kiss my baby goodbye? I begged. I've never heard such nonsense. It's only a bundle of rags, she said, and she would not let me. I pictured my poor baby so forlorn without her mother. I heard her wailing, abandoned in the basket. I wished she was little enough to hide about my person like the sixpence, but there was nothing I could do. I had to leave her there, tumbled about in my clothes. I never saw her again. As Matron Pigface marched me along to my class, I thought at least I would meet up with Gideon again, but there was no sign of him. I was thrust into a room of some 40 or 50 girls, of 5 or 6 or 7, but there was not a single little boy. The girls were sitting at small wooden desks, all startlingly similar in their white caps and mud-hued dresses. They all stared hard at me and then whispered. I shifted from one sorely shod foot to the other, feeling so shy and strange. This is Hetty Feather, said Pigface. Several of the little girls giggled. My hands clenched into fists. Thank you, Matron Peters, said a starch-aproned nurse at the front of the class. She wasn't pink and pig-faced. She wasn't grim and pale. This nurse had rosy cheeks and dimples and wisps of curly hair escaping from her cap. She was as sweet and fresh-faced as Rosie or Eliza or any of the village girls. She smiled at me. I would watch this one. She got a very contrary way with her. Redheads always are little vixens, said Matron Pigface Peters. She needs that temper quelled. Spare the rod and spoil the child, remember. She shorted and then waddled out of the room, her stays creaking loudly. Hello, Hetty dear, said the new nurse, beckoning to me. I crept up to her desk. I saw a leather strap lying across it. Oh, Lordy, was she about to punish me already? No. She leaned towards me and said gently, Do not look so fearful, child. It must seem very strange your first day here, but I promise you, you will soon get used to life at the hospital. You seem very small. Are you turned 5 yet? I am almost 6, I said. Excellent. Then I think you are old enough to learn how to darn, Hetty. She brought out a stocking and a needle and wool from her desk. Did your foster mother teach you how to sew, Hetty? She asked. The word mother made my eyes well up. I shook my head wordlessly. Then I will show you. She threaded the big needle, squeezing the end of the wool over with practised skill, and then put her hand inside the stocking. She started looping the wool across the hole in neat lines. There, do you see? Then she started weaving the wool the other way, making the neatest, smoothest patch. I watched, fascinated in spite of my misery. My head was itching horribly after my haircut, and I put up my hand to scratch, knocking my cap sideways. "Try not to scratch, dear. It's not very ladylike," said the nurse. She put down the beautifully darned stocking and took my cap off. She smoothed my poor shorn hair, drying now and sticking straight up in the air. "My goodness, I think I remember you," she said. "You were the smallest baby I'd ever seen, and you had the reddest hair." She was the nurse who had cradled me when I was newborn and wouldn't suck properly. She was dear, kind Winnie, though now she told me to call her Nurse Winterson. She bade me sit on a stool beside her while I struggled to darn a stocking myself. I badly wanted to impress this gentle nurse and show her I could act like a big girl even though I was so small. But I couldn't get the hang of darning at all. I pulled the needle too hard so that it came right off the wool. And then I had no end of bother rethreading it. Nurse Winterson kept threading it for me and patiently guiding my hands, but I could barely do a single stitch. I was in such a state I came near to flinging the stockings upon the floor. I heard whispers and giggles from the other girls. Every now and then I looked up from my wretched task and glared at them. They all seemed identical at first, but when I peered harder, I saw some had rosy cheeks and some had pale. Some had snub noses and some had freckles. Some had blue eyes and some had brown. There was one girl with a pair of spectacles on her nose who had her head bent right over her stocking, examining her stitches. There was something familiar about the bend of her head, the little frown lines above her nose. "Martha!" I cried out. I jumped to my feet in my excitement, my stocking rolling to the floor. "Oh, Martha, it's truly you!" I ran down the line of desks and threw my arms around her neck. The other girls squealed and squawked at my behaviour. Martha herself edged away from me, looking alarmed. "Hetty, Hetty!" Nurse Winterson came speeding after me. "You must not be so passionate, child, and you have to learn to stay still in your seat like a good little girl." "But it's Martha! My sister Martha!" I cried. Martha still looked dazed. "Tell them, Martha! I'm your sister, Hetty." Martha blinked her poor squinting eyes. "Hetty," she said. "Did I have a sister? Hetty?" "Oh, Martha, you can't have forgotten me." This was such a terrifying thought that I burst into floods of tears. "Oh, yes," said Martha, nodding now. "You were the little one who cried a lot." She really seemed to have no other clear recollection of me. The girls on either side of her giggled, and Martha blushed and wriggled further away from me, clearly embarrassed. I let Nurse Winterson lead me back to my chair. I picked up my stocking and applied myself to darning. But tears kept brimming, and the stocking blurred in my hand. I was so shocked that Martha had barely remembered me, her own sister. Did she not remember any of us? Rosie, Eliza, Nat, Jem? Surely she must remember Saul. I wondered when we were to meet up with all the boy foundlings. A bell rang at 4 and all the other girls stuffed their stockings into work baskets in their desks. Nurse Winterson took my poor cobbled stocking and held it up, examining my enormous stitches. "Oh, Hetty, you've sewn the sides together. How could anyone get their foot into this stocking?" she said, wafting it gently in front of me. The other girls giggled and grinned. I felt my cheeks turn fiery red. "We will try again tomorrow," said Nurse Winterson. "Cheer up, Hetty. We will make an expert seamstress of you yet. Now run and play outside with the other girls." I followed them forlornly. I did not want to play with any of them, and I was sure they did not want to play with me. They scurried along the corridor and down the stairs, calling to each other, though they subsided abruptly when another nurse appeared on the stairs. She clapped her hands crossly. "Quietly, girls! No talking at all until you get outside," she said. She noticed me skulking at the top of the stairs. "Come along, child, don't loiter. The girls' playground is down the stairs and through the big door." "But please, miss, nurse, mayn't I go to play with the boys?" I asked. She drew herself up, hands on her hips. "Of course not, you bold little girl." "But I need to see my brother Gideon. He'll be so wretched without me. Please, nurse, I need to see my brother so badly," I begged. Nurse Winterson came and stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. Perhaps it will help Hetty settle down if we let her see her foster brother for a few minutes, she suggested. But the other nurse shook her head firmly. Really, Winnie, will you never learn? You can't afford to be so soft-hearted with the children. If we change a rule for just one child, they will all be clamouring for special privileges. The fierce nurse turned to me. Now run away and play, or you shall be whipped. I ran because I certainly did not want to be whipped. The other girls were playing games of tag or strolling around together arm in arm or sitting in little circles telling secrets. I did not have anyone to play with. I peered around desperately for Martha. She was walking with a girl on either side, all of them singing a song. I sidled nearer until I was walking 2 steps behind. One of the girls craned round. "Stop following us," she said. "I'm not following you, I'm following my sister," I said fiercely. I ran round them and stood right in front of Martha. Her eyes blinked anxiously behind her spectacles. "I'm so happy to find you, Martha. I have so much news to tell you about Mother and Father and dear Jem. And did you know that Gideon is here too? We travelled together in a big steam train, and there is a new little baby Eliza. Do you ever see Saul? And that horrid matron took all my best clothes and my rag baby. I've never been to a real circus and ridden on a white horse." I was babbling now, trying to get some kind of reaction from poor Martha. She looked bewildered. "I don't really remember," she said. "That was long ago. I only remember now." "But now is so horrid," I said, starting to cry again. "Don't cry," said Martha. "Please don't. It hurts my head. All right, Hetty, you can walk with us. This is Elizabeth, and this is Marjorie." They both sighed, but let me trail along after them. When they resumed their silly song, all tra-la-las and tootle-tootles, I did my best to imitate them. Nurse Winterson rang the bell at the end of playtime. She smiled at me. "There, Hetty, you've made friends already," she murmured to me. She didn't understand that Martha was simply trying to be kind because of our dimly remembered kinship, and Elizabeth and Marjorie certainly did not wish to be friends. We all marched to the privies, where we took it in turns to relieve ourselves, 10 girls at a time. We then washed our hands with the horrible carbolic soap. I could barely reach up to the basin and got water right up my arms, wetting the uncomfortable cuffs on my sleeves. My hidden sixpence was rubbing a bruise on my skin, but I bore the pain proudly. Then we were marched again, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, into a large echoing dining room, set with very long tables. The little girls scrambled onto benches. I stood bewildered in the crush and lost my chance of sitting next to Martha. I had to squash right on the end of a bench next to a fierce-looking fair girl with a high forehead, who dug me hard with her elbow when I took a bite of bread on my plate. "You're not allowed! Not yet!" she hissed. We had to wait as endless lines of big girls filed in too, until the whole hall was filled with girls, 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 all scary alike in their brown dresses and white caps. My stomach was rumbling because I'd missed having any dinner on this most terrible day, but I still had to wait until Matron Pigface said, "Let us say grace, girls." I did not understand and mumbled grace. The fierce girl snorted derisively. "For what we are about to receive, may we be truly grateful. Amen," she chanted with all the others. We'd never said grace at home. We'd just grabbed our bowls from Mother and started spooning. But I was truly grateful for my slice of bread and my wedge of cheese. I waffed them down in 4 bites and waited. And waited. There didn't seem to be anything else, apart from a mug of watered-down milk. I was a country girl. We might have been poor, but Mother believed in giving us big platefuls, and our milk was always creamy rich. I wondered if my helping was minute because I was the smallest girl here, but when I peered around I saw that even the very big girls with chests filling out their tippets had the same size slices. I wondered how I was going to bear the enormous emptiness inside my stomach. I didn't realise that it wasn't simply hunger, though that was a small part of it. An entire loaf of bread and a round of cheese could not have eased the ache of my loneliness. I wondered how Gideon was faring in the boys' wing, unable even to ask for what he wanted, and my tears brimmed again. The fierce girl beside me took no notice, but a big girl with long plaits came over to our table. "You can go and play for a little, you babies," she said. She stopped in front of me. "Oh dear, are you feeling monk?" "She's new today," said the fierce girl. "They're always monk when they're new." I didn't know what monk meant exactly, but I certainly felt it. "Don't cry, baby," said the big girl, and she lifted her own apron and dabbed at my eyes. "You're so weeny. Don't worry, I'll look out for you. My name's Harriet. My name's Hetty. My, they're very similar. Some of the girls call me Hattie. I had long hair like yours, I said, taking hold of her long silky plaits. But that nasty horrid matron with a pig face cut it all off. Harriet giggled, but put her hand over her mouth. You mustn't talk like that about the matron. She wasn't being deliberately nasty or horrid. All the new girls have their hair cut off. It's the rule, in case of lice. But don't fret. Yours will be as long as mine in 2 or 3 years. 2 or 3 years? I'd been in the foundling hospital for less than a day, and yet it already felt like a lifetime. Do you know your way around all this great big building, Harriet? I asked. Of course I do. Don't worry, you'll learn your way around soon too. Do you know where all the boys are? Yes, they're in the West Wing. Do you know how to get there? Yes, but I've never been. It's not allowed. Have you never seen the boys? Oh, yes. Sometimes we see them across the yard at play, and we watch their sports day once a year. We see them in chapel too, though we're not supposed to peer round. Couldn't we go together now, just to have a peep at them? Of course not, Hetty. We would be seen, and then we would get into fearsome trouble. I don't care. I need to see my brother, I said. Ah. Harriet was silent for a moment. I had a brother. 2 brothers. They are here too, Michael and John. She said their names uncertainly, as if she wasn't sure. I felt my throat tighten. She didn't seem to remember them properly, and yet she was a big girl, not a small girl who was easily muddled like Martha. I resolved even more strongly that I would never, never, never forget my dear brothers, especially Jem, or my sisters, and that somehow I would find the boys' wing and seek out Gideon. Harriet wouldn't take me to the boys' wing, but she did take me to the big girls' room. There was no nurse keeping order, so the girls chatted as they mended clothes, sewing up split seams in the ugly brown dresses and hemming torn aprons. Come here, Hetty, let me show you something, said Harriet. I feared I was in for another sewing lesson. I'd already proved myself spectacularly untalented at darning. But Harriet pulled off a long length of cotton thread, tied it together, and then placed it round her outstretched hands. Watch carefully. I will teach you how to play cat's cradle. I watched, though I didn't see a cat or a cradle, just strange patterns forming as Harriet fiddled the cotton with her fingers. She tried her best to show me what to do, and praised me extravagantly when I managed to flip the thread into the right zigzagged pattern. Clever baby, she said. I felt a little indignant. She seemed all too ready to treat me like a 2-year-old, but I didn't protest. It was wonderful to have found a friend in this huge and horrifying hospital. 2 friends, if I counted kind Nurse Winterson. But at night time I was utterly friendless. All the little girls were lined up and washed by a big girl. She had long plaits, like my Harriet, but she was nowhere near as kind. She scrubbed at our hands and faces with the horrid carbolic soap, not caring in the slightest if it went in our eyes. Then we were led to the infant dormitory, a vast room of 50 iron bedsteads. I was taken to a bed right beside the door and my clothes pulled off me by another big girl. She stuck a nightgown over my head. It was so long it trailed on the floor. My shorn hair stuck out wildly in all directions. Some of the other girls laughed and pointed. I licked my fingers and tried to make the tufts stick to my scalp. Stop doing that, you look so silly, said the big girl. Fold your clothes up neatly, I said, and put them in your basket at the end of the bed. I did as I was told. I hid my lucky 6pence in my basket too, resolving to find a safer hiding place when no one was watching. Now say your prayers, don't take too long about it, mind, then get into bed. I knelt down, put my hands together and shut my eyes. Dear God, please get me out of this horrid, hateful place, I prayed. Please don't let the matron and the nurses and the other boys be plaguing Gideon. I know it is all my fault he cannot speak any more, and I'm such a sorry girl. Please bless my dear family at home, and don't let me ever forget them. Please, especially bless Jem. Please. But the big girl was tugging me impatiently. That's enough, into bed now. I opened my eyes and saw that all the other girls were already under the covers. I hurried into bed myself. The big girl dimmed the light and said, Good night, no talking now. She went out of the door and closed it tight. Immediately a whispering started. The girls called each other, chatting about their day. They started talking about me, as if I wasn't there. What about the new girl, Hetty Feather? She looks a sight. That hair! She's so small and scrawny. I saw her sucking up to Harriet. She's so stupid at darning. She went down on her knees to pray, pretending she's so holy. She's just acting monk to make people sorry for her. I don't like her at all. I jumped out of bed and ran to the nearest girl. Well, I don't like you, I cried, and I pulled her ear hard. She screamed, and I ran to the next bed. And I don't like you. I pulled another ear, then ran on. Or you, or you. They all set about shrieking, and then the door burst open, and someone stood there, an oil lamp held high, illuminating her ugly features. It was Matron Pigface. What is this terrible noise? How dare you behave so badly? And who is this child? Out of bed! She seized me, shining the lamp in my face. Hetty Feather, behaving like a child of Satan on your very first night here. Get back into bed this instant, and if you put so much as a foot on the floor all night, you will be whipped severely. She smacked at me as I dodged past her and dived into my bed. Now you are all to go to sleep this instant, Pigface commanded. After she waddled out of the room, there were several muttered remonstrances, but soon every girl was breathing heavily. Some murmured as they dreamed, some snored. I was the only one awake. I lay on my back, feeling so wretchedly lonely in my narrow bed. I longed to snuggle up beside Jem or Gideon. My arms ached for my dear rag baby. I lay trembling hour after hour. I felt so small in this huge room of spiteful girls. I seemed to grow smaller and smaller as I lay there. I clutched myself in fear that I was actually shrinking. I did not seem myself anymore. I gripped my elbows tightly and gritted my teeth. I had to hang on to myself. I was not going to become just another foundling girl in hideous apparel. I might have to wear the dress, cap, apron and tippet. I might have to obey all their dreadful rules. But inside my head, I still had to stay Hetty Feather. See you tomorrow, Year 5.